I'm Alec Baldwin, and you're listening to Marketing Trends and the Leads Aren't Weak.
Arthur Filips' journey to HCL Technologies has been unique. There were stops along the way at companies such as Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, and HP, before finally landing at HCL, where he serves as their Executive Vice President of Sales Transformation and Marketing. But what does sales transformation mean, and how is it linked to marketing? Arthur explains it all on this episode of Marketing Trends. Plus, he discusses how HCL works with the Fortune 500 and Global 2000, why it is important to understand how to build relationships throughout the customer journey, and why the tech industry is behind in one key area. Enjoy this discussion. Marketing Trends Podcast is brought to you by Salesforce. We bring marketing and engagement together. Learn more at salesforce.com/marketing.
Here is your host, Ian Faison.
Welcome to Marketing Trends. I'm Ian Faison, host of Marketing Trends, and today we have special guest Arthur. What's going on?
Hey, how are you, Ian? Good to be with you today.
Yeah, good to be with you as well. We're going to be talking about your career in marketing. We're going to talk about what you're doing at HCL. So let's get into it. First, how did you get started in marketing in the first place?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've been in the industry now 28 years. It goes back to kind of the formative time for me. When I graduated from Boston University, had some amazing opportunities ranging from, joining what used to be Anderson Consulting to Solomon Brothers on Wall Street to, believe it or not, made it through a number of rounds and was close to an offer to work with the CIA in Eastern Europe. And close to home at Boston University was Digital Equipment Corporation. And I had a great chance to join a very well-rounded management and marketing program. And everything about the program, the opportunity about marketing jumped to my training and to my heart. And the rest has been history.
So for listeners who don't know, tell us a little bit about HCL.
Sure. HCL is one of the leading technology services companies, both engineering and IT and business services, and most recently, products and platforms on a global basis. The company was founded 43 years ago in India. Today, it is a truly global company. We span over 45 countries. We have over 150,000 employees around the world, 144 nationalities represented. And we serve a majority of the Fortune 500 and Global 2000 customers, leaders across roughly 10 or 12 of the most important industries around the world, really as a mission critical long-term partner to them. And
so tell me a little bit about your role, because you have a different role than kind of the traditional marketer might have with sales transformation also in your title.
Yeah, absolutely. I joined the company almost 5 years ago, and the first 2 years I came on board to help the company as the global head of sales transformation in rethinking the overall go-to-market approach. How we went to market, who went to market, how we served our customers, how we segmented them, whether we looked at long-standing, deep client relationships, all the way through to how we worked with prospective new clients. And that was an incredible journey and continues to be so today in terms of rethinking both our selling approach as well as our portfolio of what we bring to market. Along the way, working very closely with our CEO, and right around the time I joined, he became CEO, and the two of us, along with a really strong and diverse leadership team, launched a big growth plan for the company. And just to kind of give you some metrics, when I joined the company, we were about $5.7 billion in revenue, about 95,000 employees. Today, we're over 10 billion in revenue and 150,000 employees in 5 short years. So through a combination of organic and inorganic growth, we really set out to go on an ambitious plan and serve our customers well, and it's been paying off in the marketplace. And so that sales transformation background, a couple of years into working with the CEO on that, he asked me to take on the overall marketing responsibility as well. And it really is the yin and yang coming together. If you think about it, in sales, you're working very much on a frontline basis with within the marketplace, within customers, and different stakeholders, 24/7. And from a marketing perspective, you're doing the same. Your horizon, your line of sight, some of the approaches that you take are quite different. You're thinking about market development. You're thinking about the short, mid, and long term, and how to balance and bring all of that together. And so it's been a tremendous journey over this past 5 years. My responsibilities today from a marketing perspective include all of our digital approach around the world, our digital properties and technologies, our corporate marketing, our field marketing, sales enablement, analytics and content. From sales transformation, I have the dual responsibility of our CRM environment as well, and our marketing technology platforms, our corporate brand, our internal and external communications. And then in our company, our leaders often play, broad roles. So I also am very heavily involved from a cultural and diversity perspective in terms of how we continue to grow people and grow our presence around the world. Very heavily involved in government advocacy and our government affairs portion of the business. That's within my remit. And then there's some interesting areas as well. We have lobbying efforts around the world. We work with governments to put the industry's point of view square in front of their domain. So we look at things like immigration issues and challenges, education, not only STEM, but how do we get more people involved in the technology industry in general, university relationships and recruiting. And of course, there's always the backside protection, things like crisis management and brand protection. So it's a pretty broad remit, and a great group of people make it come together every day around the world.
Yeah, I was going to say, what don't you do? That's a lot of stuff. But I think it speaks to the modern marketer that depending on the organization, how many different things you could do, just the idea of how we communicate with people externally and internally. If those two things are marketing, boy, that's a lot of responsibilities.
There's no doubt, and it's interesting because there's certainly, marketing has always been, as a profession, one of the most broadly defined terms. And, even as I meet up with peers at different industry events or talk to people around the world, and even from our own customer base, I'll typically spend time with sales chiefs and marketing chiefs. No one person has the same exact set of responsibilities. I think in many ways, the role of marketing in particular becomes a certain glue and a certain organic structure within a company. So the responsibilities can be different. It's rarely, a point in time where somebody has the same exact responsibilities from company to company, but no doubt it is, a critical component to making the machine run of any company in any industry.
Well, we talk a lot on this show about the idea of sales marketing alignment. And I think, a lot of times it tends to be kind of buzzwordy, especially in the vendor space, because you have so many vendors that bring sales and marketing together, on the same kind of sheet of music. But part of the problem always has been the fact that sales kind of doesn't necessarily care about being on the same sheet of music. They just want, either the leads or the accounts nourished or whatever it is. And marketing is kind of always fighting to do that. And so what we've seen kind of with this, with the CMO reporting to the CRO in a lot of cases is rather than the CEO, you kind of have this dynamic where it's like, marketing literally works for sales. I'm curious, like, how do you see that dynamic of, marketing being their customer, quote unquote, is actually the salesperson? Because it seems like a lot of the best CMOs are figuring out that if they can serve, sales in the best way possible, and that's truly, part of their customer, then they can, operationalize and get on the same sheet of music a lot easier than kind of like the other way around, which is just like, hey, let's bring everything to the table.
Yeah, listen, you bring up a really interesting point, and it's often the one of the hardest things, not only for CMOs and sales leaders to figure out the balance of that relationship, but as you go up and down the organization, from client partners and account representatives to their marketing counterparts at all levels of the organization, right? Figuring out the right balance and how the pie gets divided up and how each helps each other out is probably one of the most important things of a modern marketer or seller today. There's always kind of been, I've seen in different companies where bureaucracy or big systems will dictate the relationship of how sales and marketing work together. And I think, one of the things I really value within HCL is that leaders tend to, there's structure, there's balance, but there's also a lot of action. And there's a lot of, rather than do things by proclamation or email, there's a lot of, let's pick up the phone and let's have agreement and let's go do it for the sake of the marketplace and for the sake of our customer. And so I think a lot of that culture and attitude helps foster a strong sales and marketing relationship, at least in our company, and it's been very successful. There's no doubt that each role, whether sales or marketing, has its own requirements and its own metrics, but they're so intertwined with each other that it's almost impossible to, it's unhealthy not to make it a strong relationship. And one of the things I've talked to a lot of sales and marketing leaders about is the importance of being able to empathize and see both sides of the coin and to find, this positive common ground that is working towards the same goal. And usually the goals are the same, right? Grow revenue, grow brand. It doesn't get any more simple than that. And really both have that responsibility, both marketing leaders and sales leaders. Each will come at it from a different science and art, but they ultimately have the same objective in mind. And if you can achieve that level of trust between leadership, everything will flow through the organization as well.
I'm curious, how did your first 90 days taking over marketing go? Like, what were the things that you wanted to prioritize and make sure that you knocked out of the park?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm thinking back to that time. It's a great question. First thing I'll tell you is I was, the first 90 minutes when I found out that this was happening, I couldn't contain myself because what I saw, particularly, on the sales side of the house, and again, there are a lot of great peers that I have that lead businesses that have big sales teams. I became kind of the central point, the unifier of the overall system for the company. The translator, the unifier, the governance, the direction setter. But it was very obvious to me that in marketing, there were some tremendous capabilities that we had an opportunity to get even closer to the field, closer to certain markets and customers, and that the opportunity to really have both teams working together very closely in building new ecosystems was our holy grail. And so that first 90 days for me, and members of my team will remember this well, we got people together in conference rooms. I spent a lot of time, just first trying to introduce myself and, beyond the corporate profile and the resume and the LinkedIn profile, just sharing a little bit about what makes me tick and my background, and also find out the same from each of the leaders. And that was an eye-opening experience. It gave me a real good exposure, and I think it gave a lot of people exposure to each other that may be working in different geographies or different parts of the marketing team they hadn't realized before. Breaking silos and having everybody work together as one team was one of the first things that I set out to do. Because even in marketing, there's so many different responsibilities. And while everybody's in the profession, in the organization, on the same page, if you're working, on a particular industry set of marketing initiatives, your relationship, for example, with the brand team or the digital team might be very formal. And you don't get to spend time with the team itself and get to know them. So there was a lot of, silo busting and team building that took place. The second thing I'll tell you is I had a list, both from my observations as well as other sales leaders. And then I gathered different challenges that the marketing team itself had brought to my attention. And that list was probably, 400 or 500 points long of whether it was challenges or operating things we could do different or new opportunities to explore, places to go invest. It was such a big list. And what I found after a while was, there were a couple key themes, probably 3 or 4, that we wanted to go all work on together. And we began this transformation. We've been working, the last 2.5 years on this transformation. And there's no doubt there's been probably one of the closest relationships in the 43-year history of our company that marketing's had with the overall business. We decided that we would, make sure our first priority was always marketing for the overall company brand, for not any one business or business unit or geography or industry team. That we'd always, the hero of the game was the company itself. And after that, we would then tackle things like geographies and vertical and horizontal businesses and different components within there. But having that architecture and some guiding lights really helped us march towards a new North Star.
I'm so curious because I'd imagine, with a company like HCL, with the sprawl, and I use that in a good way, but with the sprawl of products and industries and services that you're offering, I'd imagine, there's just so many moving parts and so many plays that you'd be running from a marketing perspective that having that alignment is critical. And you all have, and people could check out the website, this strategy, this mode 1, 2, 3 strategy, which I think is really interesting. And so I'm curious, maybe you could talk about that a little bit, and then what that means from a marketing perspective. How do you market this type of strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things. It is a big sprawling company, and we have really built both homegrown and then some smaller things acquired throughout time. But we have built and grown a really big, strong global presence and industrial technology organization that can serve the most mission critical businesses around the world that are very complex. And with that, even from a selling and marketing perspective, you can, people will tend to, and this has happened throughout history in corporations, tend to focus maybe on their one division or the one piece of the overall pie. And the way I used to kind of describe it was HCL is like a 12-lane supermarket. And, we let people down the first aisle, maybe the second aisle, but they don't get to see the other 10 aisles. And we've been hard at work from a marketing perspective, making sure that we can open up the full, market to our customers. Not every customer is going to want to shop in each aisle or do business with us in each aisle, but the options are there. The solutions and the capability to meet even their unforeseen needs are there. That's the story and the narrative that we have brought to the marketplace. We set a strategy in place that helped ground everything we do called Mode 1, 2, and 3. And, I'll kind of give you my version of it. There's, we have a technology version of it. But, the way I kind of humanize this is that mode one for us is looking at the immediate horizon, looking at, current operations. How do you become more agile, more lean, more industrial strength across your entire business? And how do you use technology to do that? So we'll partner with companies to look at their strategy. And clearly, we always respect, we have great domain expertise in many industries, but we respect that clients always know the ins and outs of their business and their culture better than anybody. What we do is marry up and partner with them very well to bring the technology aspect to bear and help them maximize that in their mission. Mode two for us is really looking at what are the next gen, next horizon types of technologies that will help them not only modernize, but transform their business. And, I haven't met a customer yet that doesn't want to be number one in their industry. So we try to really help them see the opportunities of how they can leapfrog the pack or the competition using the best, newest technologies on the horizon and how to bring that into their business and scale it. And then mode three for us is really a construct where we get creative with customers. We can look at organic and inorganic growth models together. We can look at how to industrialize intellectual property together, whether it's assets, whether it's pure IP, whether it's software, whether it's products or platforms. And we can help them oftentimes create new businesses using their own inherent IP and through technology monetize that so that they can grow their own business. And that's served us very well. I will tell you that to me, there's also kind of around these three horizons or modes, there's always the underlying and underpinning aspects of making sure a business is dynamic and secured. So we'll spend a lot of time working with our clients to make sure that while they're focused on growth, on the offense, that they're also protecting and securing the back end on the defensive side. And that's not just their IP or their networks and their technology. It's how do they protect their brand, which ultimately can be the final destination if you have some type of malicious, attack on your company. And then every company, just like we do, has a vast ecosystem of stakeholders. It's not just employees and customers and partners, but it's government partners, it's local partners, it's things people do from a social responsibility or sustainability perspective. So and it's universities and it's future employees. So how do you bring all of those stakeholders into the equation to look at a business entity? And again, our contribution is not only bringing those types of people together, which we're very good at doing, and in particular in marketing, we're very good at seeing that. But then how do we use technology to sustain those relationships?
You grew up in sales at some, well-known companies, IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, HP, and others. And we've talked a little bit about sales transformation. And I think that part of the thing that can be frustrating for sales, and why I kind of wanted to talk about the mode 1, 2, 3 strategy, is when marketing is out kicking the coverage, right? When you're marketing the next gen services, when those aren't in the product suite today, right? When you're saying, hey, and I guess for you all, they are, but the idea that marketing is, evangelizing this future state that your company is trying to do. But what the salespeople on the ground want is we need to sell the products that are currently on the SKUs, right? So I'm just curious, how do you look at creating campaigns that are in the here and now, but also having some marketing campaigns that are more forward looking, kind of in line with that strategy?
It's actually a little easier, than kind of the thought process or reflection of it, because technology in itself always tends to point to the future, whether you're selling it or you're buying it. But at the same time, while you want to have future capability in the technology, the reality is it has to work today, right? It has to be able to work today. So a lot of I think there's a great partnership between marketing and sales to have that blend of, we've got to look at how we can implement and actually deliver this. And in our case, we own a lot of assets. We sell a lot of assets, in the product and platform arena, but a large portion, the majority of our business is through 150,000 people, providing technical services and consulting and, managed services and the cloud and digital for customers. So it's a lot of heads and hearts and minds that come to bear and expertise for a client. So I think there's been a very good partnership worked out from that perspective in, helping us, ground what we can deliver today, but also show a client as to where this goes, not only a quarter from now, 2 quarters from now, but, 48 months out, 60 months out, whatever it might be. And I think we've struck that balance, just through the working spirit of what we do.
Well, and you mentioned, I love the analogy of walking down the supermarket aisles, because I feel like it's a great analogy of how a company with a huge product suite can feel very siloed from a sales and marketing perspective and can be very confusing for the customer. I'm curious, how do you look at that customer journey, or that customer-centric journey, where you're plugging in sales in the right places and the value-added ways, and plugging in your marketing along that journey to help them make the decision where, there's a lot of consultative selling, there's a lot of products to be offered, and you can't just kind of, you can't just, throw all the food in the aisle at them. Although they'd probably take the toilet paper at this current day and age because of it's being shortages on every shelf in America.
Absolutely. Well, there's, it's interesting, and it's a great question. There's actually in the journey it is both art and science, and I get to see it from both perspectives. I'll start back from the selling end. One of the things we put in place when I first joined, we initiated a client partner program, and I looked around the industry. I looked at, everybody from McKinsey and Accenture to Deloitte and PwC and IBM. And I looked at and I grew up myself as a consulting partner at IBM at one point in time, a lot of stops in my career, in terms of getting experience and being a consulting partner, taught me about that angle of it and the structure and the responsibility and the opportunity that a partner can have for a client. And so as we created this program very specific to HCL's environment, it serves our top 150 clients. We have about 1,000 or so clients that are very substantive. And the top 150, though, are really in a very special elite category in terms of the size, the magnitude, the criticality, the number of, investment, co-investment, things of that nature. And those client partners had to go on a very different learning journey than our typical account manager. They typically live solely with that one client for many years at a time, very large teams. And the responsibility is far more than just, meeting the quarter expectations of selling a new project or winning a new deal. It involves things like full-scale relationship development across a company, proper account planning, really establishing strong points of view and helping them transform their business. And so, when you kind of roll that up and start looking at it, how do we do that at an industry level? That's where our marketing teams get very heavily involved and work not only, at an industry level, for example, to develop our footprint in financial services or life sciences and healthcare, or, there's about 12 industries that we cover very intensively around the world. We look at a combination of the overall industry and all of the ecosystem. And then we also look very specifically at all of those clients and look at how we can have some unity at the top, but also have a bespoke nature with each of those large clients. And that has helped us, significantly in understanding the overall journey and the relationship cycle. Because, we think of client journeys in terms of how they buy, how a sales cycle goes. The reality is that every client, especially in this type of complex world, has many different selling cycles going on. And even when they're not buying, which is about 98% of the time, that 98% of the time is where the relationships, the depth of, interaction, the trust, the points of view get established. And marketing plays such a critical role, not only in supporting the account team or the client partner, but also, really creating a very broad and deep experience and kind of an experiential way of consuming and understanding what HCL brings to the marketplace. And, I think we've built a very strong team, both in the corporate marketing arena and our field and business unit marketing teams, so that we understand how to create that ecosystem and that fabric that's long-term, deep, and trusting, and very intellectually driven.
Yeah, I always think about the fact that, it's the kind of old adage, like you don't close in February, like you don't close in December, you're closing in February, you're closing in March, you're closing every single, every month, every week that goes by that, that rep is not helping their customer. That makes that email that you send in October to say, hey, are we still good for renewal in December? That much more difficult if you're not staying along the way. And marketing is a double-edged sword there, right? If you're constantly top of mind for your customers with really helpful, relevant content, and your reps aren't doing their job, like that's not great either. You're just reminding them how crappy their service is at that current moment in time. And so, sales enablement is really, and we've seen, I think it was at Serious Decisions this last year that I think sales enablement was kind of like, is more of, I forget the exact thing, but basically sales enablement, being a true marketing function and figuring out how that's a marketing function is one of the things that is like a best practice these days, and really kind of aligning those two things. But I always think back to like, how much work the marketers are putting into creating content and doing these things. And if they're not putting that stuff in the hands of the reps to share those timely, relevant things, to have them be that trusted advisor and expert, then, then why are we going to spend so much time if that last mile isn't going to get achieved?
Ian, you're so right. And, what's interesting is, today, and we look across, we do extensive analysis on, who are our buyers and who are the stakeholders and influencers. And, the reality is there is no single solo decision today. A lot of that started back, with Sarbanes-Oxley, a decade and a half ago. But the reality is that you have multiple departments, multiple leaders. You have, there's a voice of the user that's very important. We've seen a lot of examples where, a C-level executive's made a decision, but his or her constituency has completely rejected a decision, through maybe a passive aggressive or, silent protest. So, for us, it's important to get to know, whether it's our current customer or prospect, to get to know all the different elements and culture and people involved in this process. And so marketing gives us a great, foundation to be able to bring, not only identify those people, but to nurture them along the journey, and to nurture them beyond just a single journey, but towards multiple journeys and towards a long-term basis. And, there are so many both traditional and digital means we use today to do that. Some of it tool-based, some of it event-based, some of it very account-specific or industry-specific or through influencers and advisors and analysts. But there are many approaches. And, I think we've gotten fairly sophisticated and agile at understanding how to do that. And build, at the end of the day, what you build is a very strong, trusting, intellectual community. And I like to take community farther and say ecosystem with our, customers and all of their stakeholders.
Do you have any favorite campaigns that you've done over the past couple of years?
There are several, but I'll tell you, I think there are a couple that I'll just point out two. One is what we call global to local. And that was really something that we started in the US marketplace, and then we expanded to multiple marketplaces. But the theory behind it was bringing the best of our overall one HCL global footprint to bear, but then really accentuating a very specific market. And, in the case of the US, for example, we were about to celebrate our 30th anniversary of being in the United States market. We started in 1988 in Silicon Valley, even before Silicon Valley was called that. And, we were one of the original hardcore companies, partnered with many of the stars that people know Silicon Valley for. And, we're really a bedrock there. But across the United States, we have, from, kind of the high-tech corridor in Boston to the Midwest, all the way out to the West Coast, we have a very strong and significant history and blueprint. So there were a couple things. We wanted to use global to local to, first of all, celebrate internally, this historic landmark and birthday of our strength in the United States. But we quickly realized our customers wanted to be involved, and they wanted to, use some of the tenets and translate our own program into their both global and local footprints. And what we realized was we could bring some best practices on a global basis together with very localized cultural elements and share both internally and externally, between all these different unique things that happen on a global or a local basis. And so we ended up, for example, creating lots of video testimonials of both employees as well as customers in the US market. And then we found that people from all of our other countries said, hey, give us access. I want to know what my colleague or my counterpart is doing differently, in Dallas or in Los Angeles or in Chicago than what I'm doing here in Singapore or I'm doing in Stockholm. And people love that. They wanted to understand and learn more about their peers. And then we brought this to other markets and other areas, to Australia, New Zealand, to the Nordics, and we did a very special one for Sweden. We did this in France, and we're continuing to do this around the world now. And it's been a very strong and beneficial campaign. And, even government officials and ambassadors have gotten involved in these campaigns. So that's been really successful, and it's kind of brought humans and technology together. The second thing I'll mention is we have always been a very strong strategic partner at the World Economic Forum. But in the last 2 years, we took it to a different level. We hosted probably the largest pavilion at the World Economic Forum in Davos, a real high-tech pavilion that served as both a technology lab and innovation demonstration center, but also a platform, both in person and digital, for leading CEOs and world leaders to come together to debate societal issues and to look at how we can use technology to help solve those societal issues. And so while the benefit clearly, is within that week of being in Davos and, having that social media and press and personal interaction and great attention around certain issues, we're actually able to take a lot of that content and the relationships, and throughout the year, continue to talk about things like sustainability, or, financial equality, or other aspects of the environment or the workforce or automation, and what's happening to jobs from that perspective. So it's been those two campaigns really stand out. I mean, there's so many others that our team have done and that I'm extremely proud of, but those really had tremendous global stature and brand impact, and not in a way to go out and make claims or beat our chest in a way that was not appropriate, but really to add a substantive contribution to some very significant world challenges that people were working hard to solve.
One of the things that you have talked about and advocated for is, women in the workplace, particularly advancement in the gap in technology. This is something obviously Silicon Valley has been focused on, since there's just between the pay gap and just gender gap in hiring. I'm curious, what are the things that you all have worked on, and why is this something that you feel like you can carry the torch on a little bit?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I'm very passionate around this. The why is real clear. I mean, for any entity in any business to be successful, it's just been proven time and time again. The best outcomes, the best that you can do in this world is to have diversity of backgrounds and thoughts, and a wide range of skills. So that's both gender diversity, but it's also racial diversity, other types of diversity that are very important to have in the workplace. And I will tell you that the tech industry overall, right? And I'm talking about the all up 5 trillion of the $82 trillion global GDP. Hardware, software, services, everything in between. The industry itself is probably one of the least diverse industries of any, which is really, it's one of those things that makes you scratch your head, because the greatest opportunities to build society in the future, to solve a lot of problems, to help the world scale in different ways, is through technology. And, so it's important for all leaders today to look at how do we solve that? How do we make the workforce not only more palatable today and more proper today, but then how do we bring in new generations of people of all types of backgrounds that can continue to contribute and even make it better than our generation of leaders has done. I'm really honored that our CEO, day one from he and I working together, he took it very seriously, and not just in words. We backed it up in a lot of ways. We've made it hardwired in the system, in terms of making sure that processes were very transparent and open, that, levels of equality were reached. And we've made a significant march towards that. We're not where we totally want to be, but our improvement over the last probably 3 or 4 years, in several different diversity categories, has probably been faster and better than most companies in technology. And it pays off for us. It pays off in innovation. It pays off in ideas. It pays off in really the whole viewpoint of bringing humans and technology together. And so it's something that we're going to be very passionate in and continue to stay critically focused on. I will also tell you that, now, for example, wherever I go in the world, these days, not very far, it's all by video. But a major part of the discussion that I have, no matter what country, what city, what customer, what town hall, there's always a component of an additional time set aside for all people invited to the table to talk about our culture, our diversity, and how we build on the good and improve on areas where they need improving.
With everything going on in the world right now, with COVID, it's a tough time to market. It's a tough time just for everyone. A lot of tragedy, but life goes on, and it's important for leaders to figure out how to keep things going during time of a crisis. So I'm curious, like how do you lead during a time of a crisis? What are some of the things that you're doing?
I'll tell you, it's interesting. I've thought about this a lot, and there's certainly lots of points of view out, whether in social media or on TV these days. And I can't tell you how many, hundreds of emails with, new leadership webinars sprout up every day. But, I think back to my own experience, somewhere around January 4th, I remember sending my first email to my leadership team to say, look, we need to not only pay attention to this, I want travel to stop to this area, to this region. This is probably going to spread. We're all international travelers. I think sometimes people, miss the fact that, all the key airports in the world, the connections, it's so easy to see how, whether this virus started in one country or not, wherever it started, we know where it started, but it can spread very easily in airports and be transported. And it was only a matter of time that this was going to become a global situation. So we started thinking immediately about how we shift some of our own priorities away from, probably with a limit of not being able to be in person, not only together, but with our clients and with other members of our ecosystem, and how we would really drive our business towards a combination of digital experiences, content experiences, how and where we'd focus on our brand and strengthening it during this period of time. We had to start thinking about the tonality of all of our external messaging and and not only external, but internal. This is a period of time where I think empathy and compassion are probably number one for any leader. It's not about making the quarter right now and, being tough on performance and things of that nature. Those are always going to be part of a management, recipe. But this is a period of time that nobody has ever, despite all the training and life experiences, nobody's ever had this one kind of configuration of events happen. And it's so new and different that we have to make sure we bring along not only the strongest people, but those that are most vulnerable within our own companies, within our own neighborhoods. And so we've put a lot of emphasis there. It has been a 24/7 situation since January. We actually formed an executive crisis team around the 26th of January. And that executive crisis team, all businesses, frontline leaders, enabling functions, sometimes 8-10 hours a day in different sessions. And it's everything from logistics, internal issues, external issues, financial issues, but ultimately, how do we steer the enterprise and also help our customers? And I think that's paid off and brought us closer together as a leadership team. It's interesting. Even I think back in my own experience, I travel upwards of 1 million miles a year, and all the people I see on a normal basis, give you another analogy. I made diamond status the first week of February on one airline, just from my travel in January. So with all of that, I've actually grown closer and probably seen and understood more about some of my own peer leaders and my own team and teammates through video and through this period of time. And I think everybody kind of has that it's not just the intellectual attachment to the business, it's also the emotional attachment to all, striving and defining what's next for ourselves. that's been prevalent.
Let's get into our lightning round. These questions are fast and easy. Just like marketing with Salesforce, you can go to salesforce.com/marketing to learn more about marketing on the world's #1 CRM. That is Salesforce. Salesforce.com/marketing. Lightning round questions. Arthur, are you ready?
I am ready.
Number 1, what app on your phone is the most fun?
My Fitbit app. Keep me active. I have pretty high goals. Trying to, and I've been able to keep up with 15,000 plus steps a day, and I'm going to keep pushing it.
What about your favorite book or podcast that you've read or listened to recently?
So listening to a number of different podcasts, actually, I will tell you, I've enjoyed, believe it or not, this is kind of dry and boring, but the BBC has been, I think, very balanced and very smart about bringing a global perspective together on all the events of the day. Sometimes if you get caught up in local news, especially in the United States, it becomes a little too political. So it's been great to see what's going on in other corners of the world. From a book perspective, I just started reading a book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Himself. And I'm just in the early chapters, but I'm excited to dig into this. It's a somber topic. Somebody that is a Holocaust survivor, and his ability to focus his mind on surviving and thriving and getting to another day. And it's kind of an interesting read. So, but certainly a lot to read and think about these days.
What is your best advice for a first-time CMO?
Listen to as many people as you can, and try to understand the heartbeat and the pulse above all else. And that starts with your team, because, at the end of the day, you are an enabler of future stars, and you've got to create platforms for them to succeed and shine. So understand their pulse and understand their capabilities, and help them get the best, not only performance, but, help them become the best version of themselves in this process. And a lot will take over from there.
Why didn't you go into the CIA?
Well, it was interesting. So, long story short, my father came from Poland. When he came to the United States in the 1960s, he was actually labeled as a defector because he was expected to return and serve in the communist regime as a doctor, and he chose to stay in the United States. He was never allowed to go back to the country, but when I grew up, I was allowed to go visit my grandparents, and I learned the language of Polish and a little bit of Russian at a very young age. Read, write, interpret. And so I was actually approached on campus to be a translator, in a field office, and went through the mental tests, and I actually went through physical tests and was very close to an offer. My own mother came to visit me and persuade me very emphatically that was not a career path she was interested in seeing her son go into. So I listened to my mom.
I love it. Well, awesome. That's it, Arthur. That's all we got for today. Any final thoughts? Anything to plug?
Well, I'll tell you what. First of all, I do hope that people get to become familiar with HCL and come visit us. Either through our website, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. You'll see not only technology but the human side of what we try to do in the marketplace. And the second thing I just want to say is I really appreciate you doing this. This is, for so many people, we're all working in our homes. Whether somebody's alone or they have a big family around them, there's all kinds of things people are getting adjusted to. No doubt, it's not easy to maintain composure, and it's not easy to, operate on a daily basis. You wonder, Mondays and Saturdays now, there's not much partition between understanding what day is what. And I think people are learning to operate in an environment where we don't know the total dates or outcome or next chapter, when is it going to start for sure and how will it start? So, voices like yours and bringing these conversations to bear are a great service to everybody right now. And I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Arthur. Appreciate it. Yeah, we're happy to serve the listeners, the great Marketing Trends listeners. As always, hit us up, team@marketingtrends.com, if you have any questions or want to recommend a guest or ask questions to previous guests or anything like that. So, Arthur, thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Ian. Take care.
Take care.
Marketing Trends Podcast is brought to you by Salesforce. Discover marketing built on the world's #1 CRM, Salesforce. Put your customer at the center of every interaction. Automate engagement with each customer and build your marketing strategy around the entire customer journey. Salesforce. We bring marketing and engagement together. Learn more at salesforce.com/marketing.